the Evolution Security Podcast. Hello, everybody. This is the Evolution Security Podcast. We are here for another good episode. We are here on an evening, a summer evening. It's pretty darn hot where I am, Eric. How about you?
Man, it's real hot. So much so that it's causing me to try to move all my training into the morning, maybe except for jiu-jitsu because it's in an air-conditioned gym, but everything else, gym and of course shooting, I'm moving to the mornings.
Well, I'm kind of jealous of my wife. She's at the pool right now and living it up. But hey, I still get to hang with you all. And speaking of, we have an awesome opportunity to speak to Tessah Booth, who has an amazing YouTube channel called Armed and Styled. I'll tell you what, I've been really impressed with it as I've been checking it out in the last couple of months. Tessah, thanks for joining us and spending some time with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am also experiencing some ridiculously hot and very humid weather here in coastal Georgia, and it's terribly unpleasant, but I'm good.
Yeah, such is the summer, especially all of us that are kind of not used to the South. At least I'm in the Oklahoma area, Tulsa area, and it's either summer or it's either summer or winter here. So it hit us pretty quick. But okay, enough of the goofy weather talk. Eric, how are you doing? I just want to make sure I said hi to you, bro.
Yeah, doing great. Yeah, out here in North Carolina, it's funny. So you're in coastal Georgia, so I'm probably somewhere around this,
Savannah.
somewhere. And so, okay, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I've spent some time at that area in the Army. So yeah, Fort Stewart.
That's what brought us here.
Yep.
Fort Stewart. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, that's something we didn't talk about. So I'll just say it on the air or ask it now. So either one of you are Army or prior Army?
I am most certainly not the spouse in the armed forces.
Okay. Awesome.
My husband is currently a officer in the Army at Fort Stewart, and he will be officially ETSing out of the Army in T-minus 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Well, Tell him welcome to the club. Except I ETS 16 years ago. So, well, awesome. I don't know is it okay to say over the air what general MOS area is he in?
Oh gosh. See, I'm not the military spouse that can tell you all of those things.
Oh, you don't have to say the MOS, but what's his job field, if you can say?
Right. So he's a captain. He's done a lot of different things, but right now his life is kind of at a desk.
Okay, yeah.
He's gonna listen to this and be like, "Really, you don't know what I do?"
That's okay. Well, I can tell you one thing he does well. He freaking shoots awesome.
Right.
Which we might hit on that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But, well, awesome. Go ahead, Aaron.
This gives us a good time to go ahead and why don't you give us a quick bio, because we'd like to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned I have a YouTube channel called Armed and Styled, and also an Instagram where I'm posting content, mostly educational content, concealed carry, and kind of everything that falls under the umbrella of concealed carry, kind of bringing my subscribers and followers along with me on my journey. That kind of started really early on in my concealed carry journey, and it's very much changed and very much morphed a lot over the years. But that's kind of how it got started. And through that, I met John and Sarah from Philster, and they hired me to be their director of customer development back in August of, I think, 2020. Maybe it was 2021. It was 2021 because it's 2 years this August. So I'm their director of customer development. I run their YouTube channel entirely. I do, videography, editing, photo. I also do customer service for them, and pretty much anything else that might be relevant or needed. My job description kind of changes here and there whenever they need it to. And then I also, my husband and I have a company called Booth Performance Designs. And I do the YouTube stuff. We haven't developed that on YouTube very much, but anything that's up on that channel is done by yours truly. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days. Lots of geeking on video and learning about all of that, in addition to, taking classes and learning more about concealed carry and all of the umbrella that falls under that.
Well, what about maybe tell about what led you to get into the concealed carry and obviously training, etc. What pulled you into this world?
Oh man. So I kind of grew up in a household where guns were a thing. We had them, but I didn't know that people carried them. I didn't have any experience shooting them or anything like that. They were just a thing we had in our house. And then it wasn't until I started dating my now husband. I think I was 17 and he was 19. And he was participating in USPSA all through high school. We went to the same middle school and high school together. So he was competing in USPSA all through high school. And then he went to college in New York, and he was on the pistol team for his college. So when we started dating, that was the world that he was in, was going to school. He was shooting every single day after school, and competing on the weekends. And when he would come back to Oregon, where we're both from, of course he wanted to have fun with the guns that were in the safe at home. And so he would take the girlfriend to the range with him. And he was my first, full introduction to shooting guns. He gave me any introduction that I had, right? After that, we got married and he went active duty, and we moved from Oregon to Georgia, so Fort Benning. And I kind of started going with him to matches. It was something that I didn't want to be, the wife that was like not supporting the thing that he was really good at and really enjoyed. So I'd go with him to the range and go with him to matches, but it wasn't really anything that I was interested in until we moved to Texas. And there was a mass shooting that occurred like almost immediately after we got there. Like we moved there, settled in, and this mass shooting occurred somewhere where I absolutely could have been there. And that was the first time anything like that had happened, anything like that I'd ever experienced. It felt really close. And I realized that I didn't have like an answer. Like I didn't know what I could have done if I'd been there. In fact, I knew that I could have done nothing actually, if I had been there. And, I've been watching my boyfriend, my husband, carry a gun over the couple of years that he had been, from the age of, 21 to 22. In that period, I've been watching him put a gun on every day. And it kind of occurred to me that was something that I needed to also do. It wasn't something that it was no longer the thing that he did for us. It was the thing that I now needed to take upon myself to take that responsibility on myself, so that, I would not find myself in a situation like that where I had, absolutely no way to change the outcome. So that's kind of how my introduction to guns and concealed carry happened. It was not something I had like any interest in at all. I understood that it was a huge responsibility. And if it wasn't a responsibility I had to take on, I didn't have any interest in doing that. Like I didn't want that until I felt like I really had to. And so I asked, Mitchell, my husband, to take me to the range and actually get me to a place where I could responsibly carry a firearm, bring my marksmanship up to that level. But boy, was the actual like learning how to carry thing a huge learning curve for me. And I very much was of the belief that I'm a girl, you're a guy, you don't know how girls carry guns, so I'm going to figure this out all by myself. That was its own journey in and of itself, and he was definitely a help with that. But as far as that path goes, once I started pursuing concealed carry and learning more about it, I realized just how much I really didn't know. And I started having the opportunities to pursue formal classes with other instructors. My first class was what's the name of the class? It's with Citizens Fence Research, John Johnston's Tests and Standards. That was my first ever formal class.
How long ago was that, Tessa?
That was 2020. One second, I'm going to plug in my computer.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was back in 2020. Okay, we're good. So yeah, my first formal class was 2020, and once I did that, I really got to see that I was capable of a lot more in terms of marksmanship than I ever really gave myself credit for, and that kind of gave me the training bug. I realized that I could be much more proficient, and that I'd watch my husband, compete at USPSA matches. You guys have seen him shoot. He's a pretty good shooter.
Oh, yeah.
And so I knew that the ceiling was higher than what I was reaching. But once I stepped into a formal class where it wasn't, my spouse teaching me, I realized that I could do a lot more. And so I started pursuing formal firearms training quite a bit. And that, I feel like that just naturally kind of led into doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like everyone at those classes are doing some form of martial arts. And if they're not doing some form of martial arts, everyone's pressuring them to do some form of martial arts. So
Awesome.
I started in doing Jiu-Jitsu. That was early 2021 because it was really pretty much right after I did that first formal class. I did BJJ for the remainder of our time at that duty station. So I think it was like 8 months of jiu-jitsu, going a couple times a week. I got my 2 stripes, and then we moved, PCS to Fort Benning again. And we were going to be there for such a short period of time, I didn't pursue it. And then we came here to Fort Stewart, and we're like 40 minutes from the closest gym. So I am not currently doing jiu-jitsu, but I very much miss it, and I fully intend on picking it back up when that becomes an option again.
Rock on.
Man, that you of course saw Aaron and I peak up when you said that, and you're probably tracking jiu-jitsu is a big part of our lives, and frankly, it is. I have gotten to where we used to say, hey, you have to do these 5 things or these 10 things, which I still agree with. But that can be daunting for everyone. So people tend to fall into medical training in this particular walk because they're exposed to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am getting to the point where I say, okay, you're interested in self-defense. You need to do 2 things. You need to pick up shooting, get competent training, and you need to do jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of the things, fitness, medical, all the other aspects, pepper spray, all that stuff starts to fall in place if we get people to do those 2 things. And we're starting to see that slightly anecdotally.
Right.
So yeah,
Eric,
I love. Go ahead.
I would interject that because those things are pretty fun to people, right?
Yes.
And then the other things, once you start really getting the importance of the other things, you understand the importance of the ancillary things that really, when we get down to it, are more important. But it's not really what this particular show is about. But yes, that's a good point, bro.
And what I would just add one other thing, and I want Tessa to be able to carry on with some of your questioning, but it's part and parcel with kind of what you were just saying. And Tessa, I'll ask you if you agree with this. If you tell somebody the most important thing you should be doing is physical fitness, some people are like, I've been told this before,
Mm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those other two things, that's why I'm starting to get to where I'm like, okay, if we can get people to just do these two things, then everything else starts to fall
Mm.
into place. But your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, honestly?
Well, and jujitsu can be it's absolutely a form of exercise. Like
Exactly.
it is so challenging, both like that, like your cardiovascular system, like doing like 5-minute rolls, like you're just gassed after that. But also like you're having to use your muscles too. Yeah, I think that I was probably I would maybe not the best shape of my life, but probably close to the best shape of my life in those 8 months I was doing jujitsu. The thing that's interesting about my particular journey with shooting and jujitsu is that I didn't want to do it. Like it wasn't like a gateway drug into the world of self-defense. And I think for a lot of people, it's something they are passionate about and they're excited about doing. And for me, it was all so intimidating and so unknown and scary to think about, like going to a jujitsu gym, especially being a little lady in a extremely male dominated space. It can just be, it was very intimidating for me at first. And I don't know how to replicate, I don't know how better to say this either. I don't know how to replicate my experience in that I don't necessarily know the best way to encourage other people who don't think that sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it felt, I don't want to say that it felt like an obligation, but in a way it felt like an obligation. It was like I decided that I needed to bring a gun into my life. And I, for lack of a better term, like consulted the gun people in my life. Like, if I'm going to do this thing, how do I do it right? And the answer that I would get from people was, marksmanship, and, safe concealed carry practices and the things that fall under that. And then, ultimately led to BJJ. But I kind of feel like for people who are not excited about doing those things, they're not excited about, going to the range and working on their marksmanship, they're not excited about, being on the mats. I think that you kind of have to have a desire to get to the end result, if that makes sense. Like you want to achieve some level of proficiency in the world of self-defense. And it's like, these are kind of the things that you kind of have to do if that's your goal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that a lot of people really enjoy it. But for me, it was like, I don't super enjoy this. But once I got into it and I realized that I could be good at it, that's when it started being fun. And that's something that my husband will say is shooting is actually not fun, but shooting well is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to interject when you say that you're intimidated, and it really wasn't. Especially, let's just focus on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Mm.
And so, my wife, for years and years, she's been the sister-in-law of my brother, who's been in martial arts and shooting for decades, and who also drug me kicking and screaming into this lifestyle too. But
Yeah.
there was always this time where I was pushing my wife, hey, you should really try jujitsu. She did
Mm.
not want to do it. She did not want to do it. Now I can't even hold a candle to her jujitsu because
Mm.
she hit it, and she hit it hard.
Yeah.
It's her favorite thing. It's her favorite
Wow.
thing to do. Now, she's not as into shooting as I wish she would be, but that's all
Mm.
right. She
Yeah.
she knows my thoughts on that. I think I even razzed her today about it. But truth be told, she's working on the most important thing, in
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. And I bet you Eric will agree with that too, right, bro?
Yeah, absolutely. And she is, what is she, 3 stripes on her blue now or 4?
3.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so
Good for
she's
her.
knocking on purple real
That's
soon.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm proud of her, and I've
Very
got a
proud of
good
her.
coach because I could, again. I think I'm repeating myself. I've said this on 3 episodes, I think, but it really is a superpower when your wife that weighs a lot less than you and is a lot less strong than you can dominate you with
Mm-hmm.
technique. So, and that's no lie. I don't have much of a prayer against her. So it's awesome. Jiu-jitsu is awesome.
And
Well,
coming from a blue belt yourself, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, I'm okay at it. I need to put more time into it, but yes, I'm a little bit experienced with it. Well, awesome, Tessa. That's a great point of view, and it's fun hearing that from you. Now, this brings me to the question or the concept of the fact that we were able to meet at TacCon 2023. Now, that was mine and Eric's first time. And when we ran into Tom Givens, who we've known for a little while, we said, "Hey, this is our first TacCon." And he looked at us and goes, "Where the F you been, man?" So just curious how your experience was. Was that your first time? Let us know how that went for you.
Yeah, it was also my first TacCon. It can be kind of an elusive event to be able to get to because the
Yep.
tickets are gone in the first
24 hours, 20,
That's
24
been
it's
our
hours.
that.
problem for years.
That's been a thing for years, you said?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Or I was deployed. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
we've been trying to get into TacCon. I would put it, I would say at least 6 or 7 years for
Wow.
myself, and I
Yeah.
know Aaron, and we've known it for longer than that. I mean, just
Yeah.
silliness, but yeah, that was
Yeah.
hilarious. Sometimes, where the F you been?
Well, and you kind of have to decide you have to decide you want to go to TacCon, and then you have to, you know that you can make it all
Yep.
before the tickets are available, right?
Yep.
So
Mhm,
once the
mhm.
tickets are available, you're buying them. And yeah, so this was mine and my husband's first year at TacCon, and yeah, we're excited to have been able to have the opportunity to go. I did one live fire class while I was at TacCon, and I kind of came into a couple of different classroom classes. I helped a little bit with John and Sarah's concealment class. That was really interesting. I spend a lot of my time behind a camera teaching concealment. And I will often find myself explaining it and walking people through it at the range and, whenever it'll come up in person. But that was my first time in a concealment class. And it was really interesting to watch both light bulbs come on with other people, and also kind of watch the things that people would get confused on, or the things that would kind of go over their head, or maybe if I explained it slightly different, they got it. That was really fun to actually not be talking into a lens, but be talking to someone and getting like an
Mhm.
actual response to the things that I'm saying. Um, that was really, really fun. Another thing that happened at TacCon was I found myself as one of the subjects of Craig Douglas's what's it called? ELL.
Oh
Do you guys
yeah, I
remember what
remember
that?
seeing you in
The
that.
experimental
Experiential Learning
yeah.
Lab.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yes.
mess it up even though yeah. Yeah.
You know it. Yeah. So I was supposed to be in a live fire class when that was happening. And I ran into Craig as he was like doing something or other, and he was like, "Hey, are you going to be at the ELL?" And I was like, "Oh shoot, no, I have a live fire class." And he was like, "I see," So
Sounds like Craig.
I wound up not going to my live fire class and just planning on going over and just watching the learning lab. And sure enough, he was like, "Raise your hand if you've never taken any coursework from me." And I was like, little hand right here. And if you like have seen me at classes or any like range activities of any kind, if I have the opportunity to be seated, whether it's like in the grass or the dirt or whatever, I'm probably sitting down while everyone else is standing up. So I'm like sitting down in the grass while my like little hand is up. And he didn't see me, and I'm thinking like, I'm gonna get away with this. I'm not gonna get selected. And then all of my, you know, like all my friends that are there are like, Tessa has her hand up. So
good friends.
right, very good friends. Yes, they just wanted to watch me fail. The best kind of friends. But yeah, so I wound up doing that. That was really a really unique experience. I've known for a very long time that an area that I really need to work on is verbal agility. Did you have something to say, Eric?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have left my hand down until you finish what you're saying. So I want you to carry on with that thought, and then I will ask my question. So you were saying you need to work on your verbal agility.
Right. I need to work on my verbal agility. And so going into that ELL, I was nervous about it, just, you know, because I knew that I didn't have a lot of verbal skills. But it basically, I knew that I needed to get into Craig's coursework, and that was a really, really good taster experience.
Mm-hmm.
And was just another like kick in the pants, another reminder that is, you know, an area that I need to pursue more is not only verbal agility, but also, you know, the combative side of things, alternative tools side of things. A lot of my time has been spent on marksmanship. And I'm very much in a place right now where I am spending a lot of time on my own on marksmanship. And as far as going to next year's TacCon, I don't know about you guys, but we're all signed up to go in 2024. And I think that I don't want to take any live fire classes going into 2024. I'd like to focus on just taking the class options. There's such unique opportunities at TacCon.
Oh yeah.
And there's one exception. There's one exception to this. If Tim Herron comes back and he teaches his one-handed shooting skills,
yeah,
I will make an exception for that class, and I will probably do a live fire if that's available. But besides that, I definitely want to spend time at 2024 doing that. And then the last thing I want to say about TacCon is just that the people, like that was what made it. Like it just, especially we did get to stay at the hotel that a lot of the other students were staying at. And that just facilitated a lot of natural conversation. We're all coming back from classes at the same time. We're all like, you know, headed out for dinner at the same time. And so you're passing by really people you've never met before, or people that you're excited to have conversation with. And it was just, that was probably one of my favorite experiences of the whole thing, was just getting to meet people that I've met online, and really like talking with people into the like late hours of the night, early morning.
Oh,
Awesome.
I cannot agree more. I know Aaron feels the same way. And it's interesting that you bring up what your plans are for next year. And unfortunately, Aaron and I are not going to be in next year due to other obligations, but we'll definitely follow on in 2025. We're not very happy with not being able to be there. But what I will tell you is that I had already made that decision myself, is that I am, if anything, I might choose one that I really want to go to, but otherwise, if I don't get in any live fire classes the next TacCon, I frankly won't be that big of a deal to me. And I just want, what I was going to comment on earlier, I'm just going to be straight up. I would have assumed from your background that you have already had been in one of Craig's classes. And the only reason I say this, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but your pragmatic approach to things and the fact that you already have a jiu-jitsu background, I just would have assumed. So what it made me happy to hear that was your first experience with Craig, and also your description of the way that he pushed you into it is just classic Craig. And so Aaron and I are multi-alum of ECQCs and EWO.
Mhm.
And Craig is a dear friend. But I mean, that started with training with him.
Right.
Most assuredly, to this point, if you've not had an opportunity to take ECQC, you must do so.
Yeah.
And I promise you, your 2 stripes on that white belt is like a superpower. And
Man,
you
that's
know,
not what I've heard from other people.
so
I've been told that you're just going to show up and get humbled no matter what.
no, that happens completely.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll put myself out there.
Yeah.
I'm not all that. I'm a purple belt, but I have had a lot of experience in other combatives. I'm an instructor in Muay Thai, an instructor in other systems as well. And again, I also I've been in multiple ECQCs. I think 7 is the number now.
Wow.
I really would have to look at that again, but I all the time get humbled, and there's one main reason why. It's because Craig makes it that way. He
Yeah.
makes sure that he does that. But here's the other thing, Tessa, is he is also not going to choose people that are going to dominate you either.
Right. Yeah.
Because he wants you to have, to use his words, the honest experience to where you gain what's necessary in the learning process. And so that's why when we get the opportunity to encourage people to go, is that it's just you got to do it.
I'll interject here too, that whenever he chooses, however he chooses the people to match up in Evos, it's actually quite interesting to watch him because there is a method to it all.
Absolutely.
It's after he chooses them, you can pull him to the side and say, "Hey, Craig, were you doing this and that with that?" "Oh yeah, that was my exact plan." And here's one thing that Eric gets the brunt of. Eric is always, since every time because all the ECQCs I've been to, Eric was the host. Every single first Evo of every single section, Eric gets called. I mean, literally, his first name, Eric. And he looks around the room for the badass in the room.
Yeah.
So Eric gets to start it out right. So yeah, a blast of a class. It's life-changing. I'm sure you being involved in this industry, it's life-changing. That's not an exaggeration. So
I have had everyone. I've had so many people tell me to go to ECQC. In fact, that was absolutely brought up at the first class that I ever took with John Johnston. And that was actually why I started doing jiu-jitsu. Now we start talking about it. That's why I decided to do jiu-jitsu, because I knew that I ultimately was going to get to a place where I had to go to that class. And going into that class, as a 100-pound, 5-foot lady, I thought maybe I should have something else going for me, like anything going for me. So I pursued jiu-jitsu so that I could at least feel like I had some level of confidence going into that class. But yeah, you caught me. I haven't gone yet.
Oh no, and I sure hope it didn't seem like I was
not at
you,
all.
not
whatsoever. Not at all.
Well, there's
go ahead, Aaron.
Knowing what you do, we doubt it'll be more than 6 to 7 months before you hit one. So
we'll see. This ETS has a lot of things up in the air. So
yeah.
You may not want to talk about it on the area. If not, we can just certainly edit this out. But do you guys have a roundabout location you guys are wanting to head towards? Or
so it's kind of tough because we're from Oregon. We don't really want to move back to Oregon. for a number of reasons. My entire
Mm-hmm.
family has relocated to Idaho.
Mm.
Idaho is extremely interesting to us. We're very outdoorsy people, having grown up in just
Yeah.
surrounded by waterfalls and mountains. Like we both just are desperate to get like away from the flat ground and go to where the mountains are. Uh, but I mean, I don't know what your ETS was like, but it's definitely been it has not panned out the way that we expected it to. So I don't know that we're really going to be able to hand pick exactly where we want to move. Right now, we're here in Savannah, Georgia. It's beautiful here. There's 17 South, just 30 minutes down the road, and there are so many awesome instructors coming through. Lots of matches happening. So if we wind up staying here, which is very possible, we'll be happy with that. I think that in the long term, we would like to wind up somewhere, in the Pacific Northwest, somewhere on the west side of the country, so that we can just be closer to our families. But
Yeah.
for now,
Well,
it's
if
what it
if
is.
I can add to your mention of Idaho, you
Mm.
you you know of Paul Sharp, correct?
I know of Paul Sharp. Yes.
Yes. So he is in Boise.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where you guys will be looking at if you did go into Idaho. Paul
Hmm.
Sharp is somebody that should be a household name by far. Obviously he's in the ShivWorks collective.
Hmm.
He is by far one of the most influential people in my path, and also indirectly with Aaron's. And
Mm.
yeah, if you go anywhere in that area, you at a minimum you have Paul Sharp to fall on,
Right.
because I mean
Yeah.
he's a
No, that
he's a wealth of knowledge.
I've heard really good things about the shooting community in the Boise area, and that would be kind of where we would want to be, is the Boise area. I had a private lesson with Tim Herron a couple months ago now,
Mm,
and I think the first class that he ever taught was I think it's Nampa, Idaho, which is just down the road from Boise. And he had a lot of really positive things to say about the shooting community there. We haven't had a chance to shoot there. Um, but I've heard really good things about the shooting community, and I'm sure, yeah, with Paul Sharp there, I'm sure there's a lot of really awesome
yeah.
training opportunities.
Yeah, and he's a jiu-jitsu coach at the Straight Blast Gym Boise, or Straight Blast Gym Idaho. Yeah, I mean he's obviously he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he understands the weapons-based environment just as well as anybody out there
Wow.
in that caliber. So
Yeah.
yeah, just adding a little bit of ammunition
Oh yeah,
to
for
that
sure.
if
Taking
you
notes.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll say
you see us,
something.
we always take notes. Because we
Yeah.
always follow up on
I am
discussions.
sorry that Oregon ran you off, which is kind of what I'm feeling. I'm reading between the lines. Oregon, Portland, Seattle, etc. I would say the Pacific Northwest is my favorite place in the
Oh,
country.
it's so beautiful.
It's awesome, and not all my guitars are in view, but the guitars that are in view are all built by a guy named Saul Cole in Portland.
Oh.
And so Portland is I would say Portland is one of my favorite cities. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's Oregon is awesome. Too bad the politics has driven
Right.
people like us out of there.
The
But
politics, but also having grown up, we grew up in the Columbia River Gorge. My
mm,
hometown is Troutdale. My husband grew up in Boring, Oregon.
Wow.
And
Cool.
the area it's essentially a big dark cloud for 9 months out of the year.
mm-hmm,
The clouds like hit the mountain and they just kind of stick around right where we are.
mm-hmm,
And so it's pretty dark. And that, like, aside from the politics and all of that, which is absolutely a factor. It's also just really dark and like kind of
mm-hmm.
gray. It's beautiful this time of year. We'll probably be there for the entire month of August, but for 9 months out of the year, it's just kind of rain. If we do go to Oregon, which is it's possible. If we do, we'd love to be in uh, and Bend, like that on the other side of the mountain. That's where the sunshine is, and where a lot of the mountains are, and where I spent summers growing up. So Oregon is still beautiful. Oregon's still on the table. There's a lot of people there that we love, and if we would ultimately eventually like to settle down on that side of the country, but right now we're on the opposite side of the country.
The opposite.
And you know, I spent 11 years, I say myself and my family, my son, Nick, he's a Marine now, about to PCS to Japan.
Wow.
But I mean, he did the bulk of his growing up in Lacey, Washington. I was stationed as a civilian there at JBLM Fort Lewis, and some of my most memorable times were in that in Lacey and in the Seattle area. Again, a lot of them with Aaron, because you know he would travel out. To
blast.
Yeah, I mean the most incredible lifelong memories, a bulk of them have revolved around hosting Craig and Aaron coming with his family. One of our really good friends, Greg, who he listens to this show, one of our best friends, he and his family coming out there. Yeah, phenomenal. My son and I hiking, you know, in that area. So yeah, I love the area. I hate the politics. But yeah, it's like what you mentioned, the rain. During this time, you forget where you're at. You forget you're in the Pacific Northwest. You're like, man, this is the most beautiful place ever.
Yeah.
And then winter hits, or the fall hits. So
Yep. Yeah, it's fun to be there Christmas time and in August to enjoy the rivers and the waterfalls. In the summer, they're enjoyable and pretty, and in the wintertime, they're frozen, and so they're gorgeous, and it's all kinds of cozy for Christmas time. So definitely, Oregon is very close to our hearts.
Well, it sounds like to me you guys have some decisions to make, but it sounds like you got a good direction. I will say I love Georgia too. I spent a good portion of my military career in Augusta. So I was, you know, nothing sexy. I was signal. I mean, it's brought me a career as a civilian for certain. But I think this might segue us into some of your professional side. So let's talk a little bit about, well, let's talk a lot, I should say, about your YouTube channel, but let's talk process. Number one, what attributes to you are a professional and a quality channel? Can you enumerate some of that?
Yeah, so I'll say I'll kind of speak generally, because as far as like you know, you have your different categories. You have entertainment, and then you have education, and hopefully they blend together in a way. At least hopefully if you're doing education, it's also at least somewhat entertaining, right? But for me, I think that video quality, production value, production quality is really important. And that's something that I have literally started from the bottom, like absolutely ground zero, knew nothing at all about video, and learned literally everything from watching YouTube videos. And I guess before I get into that process, what is a good YouTube channel? And I think that it is good production quality, and kind of the umbrella that falls under that, but also information quality, kind of intersecting with that, and clear and concise communication. And then as far as my process with hopefully achieving that, I'll say for me, Lucky Gunner. If you guys aren't watching Lucky Gunner, I don't know what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Lucky Gunner's channel is just, it's so good. In fact, I got to meet Lucky Gunner, Chris Baker, and Kenneth. I don't know Kenneth's last name, but Kenneth is also a part of the video production over at Lucky Gunner. I got to meet them at TacCon, and kind of just a little bit pick Chris's brain on what their process is like. And I didn't realize, like, that's what Chris has his degree in. Like, Chris is a full-blown like video production professional. So it was really cool getting to talk to him about that. But as far as I'm concerned, like Lucky Gunner is the poster child for how to do a channel so well. It's entertaining. The production quality is outstanding. The information is communicated very concisely and clearly. So as far as kind of my process with running my YouTube channel, Philster's YouTube channel, and hopefully kind of achieving some of those things, I don't feel like I'm not where I want to be yet. But I have come very far in terms of, video production quality, audio, and all of that. When it comes to like making a YouTube video, it starts with just an idea, right? It starts with creating an outline. In fact, before it even starts with that, for me, it starts with either a customer or a subscriber or follower asking a question. Even, in Facebook groups too. And that's kind of how my YouTube channel even got started in the first place was, basically, I just had people asking me the same question over and over and over again. And I wanted a way to communicate the answer to them clearly and concisely. And also, as I explained it more and more, I would include more and more nuance. And that conversation was usually occurring through Instagram, which is very much a short form content platform, from like the messaging to the comment section to the actual length of the content is all short form. And so YouTube kind of served as a way for me to explain things in more depth, more concisely. And so when people would ask me a repeat question, I would make a YouTube video on it. And so as far as actually making the video, it starts with that, right? Like somebody asks a question, another person asks the same question or variation of it. And I'll start with an outline of all the things that I want to communicate to answer that question. And, that outline happens. Now I actually do build an entire script. So I'll start with an outline and then I'll build an entire script. And I'll put that onto a teleprompter and record that video, take it into Final Cut Pro, and kind of go through my personal editing process. And then, thumbnails and keywords and all of those fun YouTube things happen after that. So, yeah.
Awesome. So out of curiosity, obviously it's going to be probably I don't know, probably there's a wide margin, but average time frame from when you get a question and you haven't produced video to upload, what's the average?
I don't want to think about it.
You said you don't.
I don't even want to think about how long that is. I probably couldn't say like from the time the question happens, but like by the time I realize that it's a question I need to make a video about, and I start outlining it, it depends, of course, on the topic, right? But an outline like today, I outlined a video that took me like 2.5 hours or almost, probably 2.5 hours just to do the outline and script. And then, getting it on a teleprompter is super fast. Setting up, I have my studio set up always, it just exists here. But I do switch my studio back and forth between Philster. So the wall that I'm using here is Armed and Styled and Philster, and I change it with lighting. And that does take me quite a bit of time. So I'll probably add an hour in there for switching studios over. Actual recording time, probably with a teleprompter, it's like a fraction of the amount of time it used to take me, because I used to do it all with an outline, but off the cuff, off of that outline, if that makes sense. It was not sentence for sentence. And doing it without the teleprompter took me infinitely longer. Like it really does take me a fraction of the time now, because I can record the video straight through. It's not like 4 or 5 videos pieced together. And so that also cuts down on my editing time. But I'm kind of rambling here. So
no, not at all.
Great. This is great.
The outline takes probably like 2 hours. setting up the studio takes probably an hour. The actual filming time is probably like, let's say 30 minutes on like overall. And then the editing process is where there's a huge time suck. And it depends on what I'm trying to communicate. If it's like a highly technical topic, it takes me so much longer because I have a lot more filming that I have to do afterwards. So I will have just recorded the talking head portion of the video, which in those highly technical videos, it may be only half of the video where my face is actually talking to the camera. So basically I'll do all of my rough cuts and edits. Rough cuts, will take me an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on the length of the video. And then I'll go through and figure out where and what B-roll needs to exist. And I should probably do that all the way back in the outline process, but I think it's just the way my brain works. I need to see the video laid out before me.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Right. So I'll take notes on that, what I need to turn into actual B-roll, and I'll come back into the studio and film what I need to. Sometimes I have to use my husband as a model because I can't do whatever I'm supposed to be doing with being in front of the camera. And that's where there's a huge time suck. Like I don't know that I could give you on average. Probably on average, it's probably like 8 to 10 hours per video. Like it's no small thing.
No. That I'll be honest with you. That's around the time frame I would think. And I just want to, you made a comment earlier that I just wanted to make sure that you understood. My opinion is that you are achieving what you're aiming for. I think that you're doing an extremely professional production. It looks great. It sounds great. And the information content is spot on that a lot of people need to hear. And so I want to make sure you understood that from my opinion, and that's only one opinion. I understand that. But yeah, I think you're achieving your goals very well.
Well,
Thank
and
you. I'll take a compliment.
you said you wanted to communicate, right? And as I was looking at some of your videos, they're roughly 5-6 minutes long. But you are communicating a lot of very important information in that time period. So that's part of the art of communication, right? Like all of us we're in the realm of trying to communicate ideas and instruct people, educate people. But one thing's for sure, yes, you've got a knack for it. I don't want to steal Eric's thunder if he's got something else he's going to ask. But to me, Eric, I think it'd be fun to start talking about some of her videos because it's germane to explaining the important topics that she's covering and how succinct she is at it. What do you think?
No, I think it's a perfect segue. Let's jump into it, brother.
Well, I'm going to ruin your perfect segue. Because one thing that I think you guys might find interesting about that process, there was something that you said that made me think of it. Maybe it was something about like firearms instruction or instruction in general. But one thing that I have gained in the last, year and a half or so of working with the teleprompter is I communicate much better in person now, like just as a human, just as like a person in general, after spending hours sitting in front of a camera and reading from a teleprompter. I don't know exactly why or how that's transferred, but my ability to, I think it's like dry fire. It's like verbal and mental dry fire. Yeah. I'm having a conversation with the camera. I'm explaining topics repeatedly to a camera, but I'm doing it not off the cuff. I'm reading from a teleprompter, and I found that when I've been put into surprise, you're going to teach people how to do this thing, you had no warning, it actually will come to me much more naturally than it ever would have prior to all of this time spent in front of a teleprompter. And recently I did a whole video series with Langdon Tactical, and there was another instructor there that was doing some videos with them as well. And, we had a teleprompter there, and it was really interesting kind of getting to explain this also to him. Like if you spend time in front of a teleprompter and get comfortable reciting things to people with personality behind it, you'll make yourself a better firearms instructor. Like you will make yourself a better communicator overall. That's been a really side point, but also that's just been a really interesting thing as a human to experience, having gained a better ability to communicate with people by just reading to a lens.
Well, Tessa, what I would tell you is I'm glad you broke the segue, because that was an awesome explanation. And frankly, that's what, in many cases, this is the stuff that we learn. I mean, I'm learning a ton from you during this conversation, and the way that you connected dry fire to the teleprompter. We talk about on this show mainly because of I never got to meet the late great William April. Aaron got to train with him, but his stamp on this path for all of us is monumental. And one of the things we talk about all the time is mental rehearsal, essentially dealing with novel things on a regular basis make us better at doing the real thing in person, because our brains cannot tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And I think that you're tapping into something that really is the same connection, even though it's a vastly different thought that I wouldn't have had until you mentioned it. And I saw Aaron's light bulb open when you said that too. So that was awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I will add to, it's different, slightly different, but Aaron can probably attest. When we do this podcast, we're used to speaking in this format, and within reason, we usually keep the flow fairly well. Every now and then we'll of course we're going to have our mistakes and flub up things, but
right.
So do professional broadcasters, which we don't claim to be, but it really is about how that process works. But when I have to record a spot myself, and I simply type it out, and I read from that. But I can do this way better than doing a spot by myself, speaking into my microphone. Aaron, does the same thing happen?
100%. I just put together a spot for our sponsors, and it sounds like doo-doo compared to speaking live. It's like, man, okay.
Does it sound robotic? Is it robotic that it's like rehearsed almost?
It's very robotic. You can tell even though I'm not reading something, I've written down notes.
Yeah.
And I've got a flow of what I want to say, and I'm not reading it verbatim, but it's still, I've got this quote verbatim topic or concept that I want to put forth. And it just sounds like that. I don't know of any way to do that other than we've done this every now and then. This is fun because we're talking shop. Listeners, hopefully you're enjoying this because this is fun for us. It's not just always about shooting people in the face and tapping people out. So, yeah, it's the more I learn about it, the better I get at it. But at the same time, I wish I could sound like I do right now. Doing a spot, but I can't.
One thing that and this may also kind of be my personality. Like when I go to explain things, I get very animated. I talk with my hands. I slow my speech when I'm trying to make a point, and I'll speed up when I really want to make a point quickly. And so naturally, when people are talking, they change the cadence of their voice. They change also the volume of their voice. And the best way that I can think to equate it is when you're reading a book to a child. If you're reading a book to a child, you don't like read it like this, like you're just explaining why the duck crossed the road. You read it with a lot of personality and excitement or sorrow, and you kind of inflect those emotions into it to help them, enjoy the story more. And not the same level of drama, but in a similar concept when I'm reading from a script. I try to remember to bring my personality into it. And let's see if I can keep this train of thought. So that's actually something that I've gotten out of doing dry fire. So like, dry fire shooting competition is doing a lot of repetition, getting really confident and good at something. Once you've achieved, whatever a reasonable level of skill in that thing, whether it's dry fire, whether it's reading from a teleprompter, you can introduce other stimulus and still maintain that juggle better.
Yeah.
So like when day one, you're a beginner, you can't throw someone into a USPSA match and expect them to do a really good job, because they're trying to like, how do I grip the gun? How do I manage my sights? How do I move with a gun in my hand? Like they're managing so many things or thinking about so many things. Same thing goes when you're reading from a teleprompter. You're like trying to read the words. You're trying to match the speed in which it's reading, it's going. But once you get to a place where you're comfortable with it, you're comfortable with managing your sights, gripping your gun, moving with a gun in your hand, you can start thinking more. You can think while you're reading from a teleprompter and inflect personality and tone and speed. The same way that when you're doing a match or performing some sort of shooting skill, once you get to a level of proficiency, you can introduce other stimulus and manage that well. And the more that you add stimulus, the more that you can manage. And that's kind of a weird segue into like, as I've been spending a lot more time, doing a shooting competition, I think that I've gained the most in the last 6 months of doing, shooting competition. And that now that I'm comfortable running and moving with a gun in my hand and managing my sights and doing all those things, I feel like I can think with a gun in my hand a lot better than really any class could have taught me. Yep. And that's something that I've found is there's a lot of parallels to that in life. Once you get to a level of proficiency, you can start managing more things, and your proficiency just continues to go up.
Well, if I can just interject into that specific point, and I love that you said that. To me, the best way, now we're not talking about going all the way to master or expert or a high level in any competition. But when it comes to the proficiency of handling a firearm, manipulating a firearm, thinking, like you said, with the firearm in your hand, I can't think of a better way than competition. Whether it's a local match or going to your state or regional match, going to local matches, IDPA, USPSA, still challenge. Man, you really learn how to run your pistol, your gun intuitively. And that's a great point. And I think it's fun that we're talking about this as we're talking shop as producers of media. It's pretty fun. So we've talked about your awesome YouTube channel. Now, what we need to talk about are some specific videos that I've kind of keyed in on. I won't go deep into this, but there were a couple of, and interesting enough, it was from a Filster video that you did. A friend of mine was asking about some concealed carry issues, and I found a video. I think it was 6 mistakes not to make in appendix carry or something like that. Forgive me, I don't remember the title. Instead of writing a response, I saw this video that you and Filster made that was already perfect. So I said, watch this video. So I mean, literally, I think that was last week. And I don't even know if we were even set to record this at that point. I was just like, hey, this is a great video, so just check this out. But I keyed on a few of your videos, and the number one thing that I love about what you do on your channel is that you cut through the noise of just all the gear pimping, etc. You're cutting to the chase. And like you were talking about, wanting to be able to be succinct and communicate. where you're really good at those and you're really good at communicating and keying in on the things that people need to know in the beginning. And I think, like you said, you had this learning curve in your concealed carry journey.
Mhm.
So that I'm sure that educates how you want to present this to your watchers. The number one thing we want to talk about is your interesting video called I believe it's called Summer Concealed Carry Comfort Hack. And we'll just throw it out there. And it's very important because we've actually talked about this before, but it is about your underwear choice. Why don't you take it away and tell us about that? Because
Yeah.
it's excellent.
So I have to caveat that, whenever I make a YouTube video and I pick a title for it and everything, I'm titling it so that you can understand an idea of what the video is about enough that you'll click on it. But it also has to be something you want to click on, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is a summer concealed carry hack. It's not, the hack of the century,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot more, right, that goes into concealed carry comfort. But this one is one that both my husband and I have realized this particular summer living in coastal Georgia, where it's just, not only is it obscenely hot, but it is so humid. It's like you're just like swimming through the air. And even the smallest of things can help make that slightly more comfortable. And something that I've gathered over the years, and actually one of the early things that kind of occurred to me, was that natural fibers, as far as clothing material, can play a really big role in both concealed carry comfort and also actually concealment. And we're talking about underwear here for this particular video. That one has nothing to do with concealment and everything to do with comfort. But something that natural fibers do for you is they allow your skin to breathe. They just allow for more breathability. They also are temperature regulating. They are also, I always forget what the stinking word is. They're essentially self-cleaning. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
right. So they have
Yes.
the natural fibers have their own kind of benefits that you're not getting out of synthetics.
Oh, yeah.
And that transfers over to your underwear. Like
Yes.
the hack is to use merino wool underwear. And this is not a hack that's going to work for everyone out there. There are people with wool allergies, right? But generally, we have found that wearing merino wool underwear allows for sweat, from the gun interacting with your body to kind of dissipate quicker
Mm-hmm.
and more easily. And one of the things that has kind of occurred to me, and I kind of learned from Sarah Houtman over the last couple of months, is that skin microclimate is a huge culprit of concealed carry discomfort, especially over a long period of time. And one thing is that skin that is damp, exposed to, being damp for a prolonged period of time, is weak. Like that skin is physically weaker and more susceptible to, abrasion and all of that. But it's also just generally more uncomfortable. And so managing moisture in concealed carry around your gun, around your belt, managing moisture in that area can lead to more long-term concealed carry comfort, and it's specifically a challenge in the summertime. So yeah, that's one of the things that we have found that helps manage moisture, is just wearing a natural fiber material that has all of the benefits of natural fiber. And furthermore, this is one I got also from Sarah Houtman, using a true natural fiber sheepskin as
Mm-hmm.
either as a wedge or in addition to your wedge. So if you guys are not super familiar with wedges, right, you use them
Oh, yeah.
in between your holster and your body, and they go towards the muzzle end of your holster. It helps kick the top of the gun into your body to help reduce slide, optic, rear sight, and grip printing. But if you're say you already have a wedge solution, you can add a sheepskin kind of sheet of material between your wedge and your body. And that is actually that's the actual hack. Like that is that is an even bigger hack than investing in merino wool underwear, is adding that sheepskin layer. It is a huge moisture managing thing. And I don't use wedges very often because it causes below the belt printing for me. And that's generally a problem that a lot of ladies encounter because our pants just fit tighter. If I am specifically deep concealing my entire gun below my waistband, if I don't use that sheepskin, I'm ready to not be carrying a gun within a couple of hours. But that sheepskin prolongs my carry comfort. Like it's infinite. It is so much more comfortable to have that there.
Well, and that was something I brought up to you pre-show, is that I am a huge fan of merino wool. I mean, all my base layers for hiking. When I deploy now, I still deploy as a civilian. My last deployment to Iraq, I was almost never in a shirt other than merino wool,
right?
Because of and I believe it's antimicrobial.
Yes, that's the word.
It is legitimate.
Yes.
It definitely staves off. Like, I mean, if I go on a hike, I might wear one of my t-shirts, because if you're hiking smart, you're going to be wearing only a couple of outfits, right. and the best way to do that, and you're gonna end up smelling at some point, of course, but
right.
The merino wool is the best fiber for all of that. Right. So yeah, when I was telling you earlier is like, why don't I own merino wool underwear? So right. I'm squaring that away this week.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. From seeing that video. So yeah.
Well, another thing I want to mention too about merino wool, like, you're mentioning all the benefits of it. And when you go into the woods, you're backpacking, you're doing soldiery things or whatever you're doing, you want to be wearing those natural fibers because of all of the benefits that they provide you that even cotton doesn't provide you, right? Which, is a natural material. It doesn't have those same benefits. But another thing is in the winter, it's also extremely beneficial. It's temperature regulating. And that's where a lot of people get confused. They think that wool is only a winter item. And so when you say you should wear merino wool underwear in the summertime, they think you're a crazy person. But it's actually temperature regulating. And something that's important to note about that in terms of wintertime, obviously it keeps you warm. But one thing that, the one problem that kind of goes away in the wintertime is a concern about printing, because you're wearing so much more clothing, you're wearing looser clothing. And so concealment naturally just becomes a lot easier than it is, in the dead of summer. But the problem that does often arise is you're wearing a lot more layers, you're wearing thicker, bigger layers, and drawing a gun becomes a lot more challenging because you're managing so much more.
Excellent.
And that's another area where merino wool or just wool, cashmere, those fibers become extremely beneficial because you don't have to wear nearly as many layers if you prioritize the correct layers. So if you're wearing a merino wool undershirt, like if you like to wear an undershirt between your gun and your skin, wearing a merino wool undershirt, you're wearing a merino wool like Henley long sleeve, you're wearing a merino wool kind of button up, and maybe you have a big coat on because it's snowy, you have 2 or 3 garments. Whereas if you're wearing synthetics, you're probably wearing several more or maybe larger garments. And I found, again, that's an area where using those natural fibers can be a huge benefit, not only in concealment, but also in managing the amount of layers that you're wearing.
Excellent. Well, what I like about you keying in on this on your show is that, so everybody's pretty good and easy to convince that they need a decent firearm. Then you got to talk them into a holster that's quality. Then you got to take another step and talk them into a good belt. The concept of undergarments is actually a major part of my concealment strategy for comfort. And now I don't use merino wool yet. I'm going to check it out. But part of my concealed carry package is an Under Armour undershirt, compression shirt, and Under Armour compression shorts.
Mm-hmm.
Both made a humongous difference, and 100% it's part of my carry package. So I love that you're going even deeper and exposing us. We're pretty keyed in on this stuff, but I've not thought about merino wool as an underwear type. So
Right.
people can giggle about this. We're talking about underwear, but it's extremely important for your concealed carry comfort. Lots of people already balk at appendix carry. Well, yes, it's not super comfortable at first, but you can make it 10 times more comfortable. I guarantee it with the proper gear.
Right.
Now, actually, as an aside, hip carry is more uncomfortable to me now that I'm
It is now for me as well.
Yeah, I've actually never really I've never explored it really, but when I have tried to explore it, you guys met me in person. Like I am a very compact individual, and as a result, I have really sharp edges. Like my body has very sharp edges because I'm small, so I curve, at really harsh angles, if that makes sense. And so, my hip, where I would typically, put a gun if I was carrying strong side, there's bones there, and that's pretty much it. Like there's not really a place to put a gun there. So really the only area I have enough space to put a gun, I feel like, is appendix. And so that's kind of been my whole journey, is just, carrying appendix, and also not only figuring out how to make that comfortable, but also, I don't know if you encountered my video about the concealment percentage principle.
You just beat me to it because I was going to bring it up. Hit
Awesome.
On that.
Yeah. So I'm actually making an updated version of it where I'll kind of explain again how to do it and how to get your concealment percentage, but also explain some of the very specific applications where it's a very valuable calculation to have access to. But essentially what the concealment percentage principle is, it's specifically for appendix carry. You take the measurement, your hip to hip measurement in inches. You take your gun height measurement. So if you have an optic and an extended magazine, you're measuring from the bottom of your magazine to the top of your optic. And you measure your gun height measurement into your hip to hip distance measurement, and that'll spit out a percentage for you. And John and Sarah kind of helped
awesome.
me equate what percentages mean what percentages mean what, and how you can take your percentage and make meaningful information out of that. So essentially, if you're carrying a gun that occupies 40% or less of your hip to hip distance, you're operating on easy mode. If you're carrying a gun between 40 and 50% of your hip to hip distance, you are going to need to understand one of two things. You're going to need to understand concealment mechanics and how to apply them to your body, or you're going to need to be skilled in the art of dressing around the gun. You'll need one or two of those. If you go beyond 50% of your hip to hip distance, you need to understand how to conceal a firearm. You need to understand concealment mechanics. You need to be using a good concealment-oriented holster. And you may also need to, in addition, dress around the gun to a certain extent. And one of the questions or statements I'll often get when I explain this is like, okay, Tessa, that's really cool and all, but we all know that small guns conceal easier than big guns. Why do we need math to understand and explain that? And one of the reasons I have found it to be extremely valuable is, myself as a small human, I can explain to people that are much larger than me that carrying a Glock 19 is not really a viable option for me. I can do it if I want to spend a lot of my mental capacity working on, concealment mechanics and dressing around the gun every single day of my life. So that's one area where it's really helpful for me to be able to explain my perspective to people with this math. But an actually really practical way to use the concealment percentage principle is anytime you're switching up guns. You want a gun for a specific use case, or you're a brand new concealed carrier and you want to figure out basically what is my perfect balance between concealability and shootability. And essentially what you can do is you can get those measurements, the gun height measurements. I pull them off of handgunhero.com. It's an awesome website. If you've never used it before, you're totally missing out. But you get your gun height measurement, you get your hip to hip distance measurement, you go to the range, rent some guns, and you can use that knowledge to basically pick the perfect gun. You can pick the gun that you're going to have a reasonable concealment percentage within. But furthermore, if that's not necessarily possible, for example, for me, I don't know that there's really a gun that exists that's 40% or less of my hip to hip distance, unless I'm doing like an actual mouse gun. And so for me, I know I go into carrying a new gun with more information. So carrying a Glock 48 with an optic is 67% of my hip to hip distance. I can go into that knowing this is going to be really hard, and I don't have to get discouraged wondering why my husband can carry a Glock 48 and I can't. Like, what's wrong with me that I can't conceal this the way that he can? I have the percentage and that understanding. I can go into it with realistic expectations. So that is something I wish existed when I was dealing with all of my beginner learning curves, was the concealment percentage principle.
Well, I think a lot of people can really, and typically when we do these interviews, I write notes of things I want to put in the show notes. So I'm going to make sure that I try to get that in there, because there's something that takes place when folks get into carrying a firearm. And one of the unfortunate sides of that process, I'm just going to say it, is you got the gun guys and you got the gun shop people, and God bless most of those people. But some of them recommend firearms and holsters and belts and all of these portions of one of the most important decisions you're going to make that are absolutely wrong. Yeah. And I really so one of the things that I've keyed in with you is, Aaron and I turned 50 this year. I'm sure that we don't talk about ladies' age on here. I'm sure you're quite younger than us. But here's something that is true. Aaron and I have been in this process for decades, right? And you have condensed your experience into a fraction of that, but you've arrived at essentially where we're at right now, but you've actually articulated in addition to that and educating us and educating our audience. So I just want to commend you on that again, the most awesome part of both this venue and your venue is that people choose the right individuals to partake in information from. The Dunning-Kruger effect is out there. If we can try to limit the Dunning-Kruger down to this, we'll do a lot better. So that's the one thing I was going to point out about your calculations. And, people just need to heed to these recommendations, because one of the most important things about concealed carry is it is not going to be completely comfortable all the time, right? But you can absolutely make it comfortable enough that a majority of my time, in some instances I can't carry. In my particular job, sometimes I cannot carry, right? But of all the time that I can, in many cases, I forgot that I have the firearm on, right? So, if you're going to if you're going to carry, you're going to want it as comfortable as possible. And individuals that end up taking their gun off, and I'm being a little bit theatrical here, and placing it on the desk here, I don't want to carry it, is because they're uncomfortable. And we want to eliminate that. So that's why that information that you're putting out is phenomenal.
Well, and that's some of the, kind of gun store advice that you'll get is, a gun should not be comfortable. It should be comforting. And I certainly heard a whole lot of that when I first was getting started. And I'm, certainly of the opinion that a gun will never be carrying a gun will never be as comfortable as not carrying a gun. Like that's just how it is. Right. But if you are carrying a gun, hopefully you've come to a place where you decided that, the benefits of having it with you, the potential benefits of having it with you are worth that, hopefully minor, decrease in overall comfort. Right. But I will say if we don't take steps to make it comfortable, not only will we ultimately, maybe it'll take a couple years, maybe it'll only take a couple months, but ultimately we'll get to a place where we're wanting to leave it at home. We're wanting to take it off of our body in the car and put it into, a vehicle mounted holster or something like that. Like we're wanting to remove it whenever we possibly can. Right. Thumbs down, 100%, 100% thumbs down on doing that. So ultimately, if it's not comfortable to a reasonable extent, you're going to wind up leaving it at home, wanting to take it off. And the last thing that I found, as it was very uncomfortable for me at first, was I would pick at my gun throughout the day. Which what is that? That is a tell. That is a tell that you are armed. And I have a little bit of social camouflage to me, but if I'm messing with my belt and pulling on my shirt all day long, like you can see right past that. And so having a gun, having it be reasonably comfortable to carry a firearm is extremely advantageous. And there's really no reason. The education exists, the products exist to make it comfortable. And so there's really, at this point, I don't think there's really any reason to accept suboptimal comfort.
Tessa, have you heard Craig's statement on picking at the gun? I don't know if you've been exposed to that, but he says,
I don't think so.
just like he says, guys and gals, you know how your mom used to say, don't pick at your scabs? Don't pick at it. So, and I'm probably Craig, if he hears this show, Eric, you screwed it up.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say one thing Craig did say at the ELL after it was all said and done. He was explaining how he instructed, one of the role players, if essentially to for lack of a better term, to punish the people in the ELL if they picked at their gun. By drawing a gun on them. Like
that was Dave. It must have been Dave, I think.
Yeah.
Was it the male? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, Dave.
But yeah, that was kind of Craig explaining that in the aftermath. He said, if you picked at your gun, then he was instructed to respond by either escalating or drawing his firearm because you're indicating that to them. So yeah, the old adage that, it should be comforting and not comfortable, I think is just, there's a lot of those there. I'm right. As far as like videos go, I outlined a video today that addresses the gun store advice that you should carry the largest gun you can reasonably conceal. And although that's not necessarily bad advice, I think it's given too generously and too generally to very specific individuals. So that'll be an interesting video. I'm excited about it, actually.
Well, and very
specific individuals. I'm reading between the lines there.
Well,
that's awesome.
And Aaron, remember, and this has not released yet, but we just had Cecil Birch on for his 5th show. The 5th, show is, we've only had one person make it on here 5 times, not because that's some huge record and we keep people off, but Cecil just happened to be the champion. but we discussed that very same thing is about, hey, if you aren't carrying a Glock 34 and 2 magazines, then you're wrong.
Killed in the
And
street.
yeah, I mean, to me, when I hear individuals say that, it's just, again, I hate to use the term again, it's Dunning-Kruger, and it's, and a lot of that has to do with ego. And frankly, I'm gonna be honest here too. It is male centric too.
I was going to say it felt very gatekeeping to me when I was getting started.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. It's good. It's funny that you mentioned, and I think I did see you mention that on one of your videos at some point. So, yeah, Aaron, what else you got, brother?
So that really segues right into the next video, and I think we're starting to get close to the end of the show.
Yep.
So I want to cover this video so we can get to the most important part of the show. But that said, so I found your video, and it was really near and dear to me because you said this video was, let's see here, my first carry gun. And like on Jerry Maguire, Renee Zellweger saying you had me at Glock 42.
I thought we were going to talk about carbines. I'm kidding.
We're talking about Jerry Maguire.
Go ahead. I'm just making a joke.
That video about your 42, let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Glock 42 was technically my second carry gun, but it was the first gun I ever carried. And we're talking a little bit about like the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was definitely something I experienced. I think it's kind of hard to avoid. I think a lot of people go through that.
It is. And it's okay.
Right.
As long as you get the hell out of it.
So I started out with the Glock 42. My first gun that I got for concealed carry was a revolver, a Smith & Wesson J-frame? Yeah, revolver. And I never carried that. I did carry the Glock 42 at first, and then, moved on to a Glock 48. And I have another video where I kind of talk about why I made the decisions that I made, the different carry guns. And that was a really interesting kind of evolution to kind of go back on and remember and think through. But the Glock 42 is a really kind of slept on gun. Like, it's not something that people think about because it's, it's 6 rounds, it's 380, like, 380. But actually, it's a very concealable gun, and it's extremely shootable. Like, it feels like shooting a 22. And for me, it could not have been a better first carry gun. Like, a lot of people are like, my shame, my first carry gun was like this or that. And like, it wasn't necessarily a good choice in quotations. But truly, the Glock 42 really was the best choice for me for a couple of reasons. One, it was incredibly shootable right out of the gate. I learned all of my shooting. I shouldn't say all. I learned the vast majority of my shooting fundamentals on the Glock 42.
Nice.
On a soft shooting gun. And then also, it was my first carry gun, and it was slim, and it was also just small and easy for me to conceal. And for somebody of my size, we talked about the concealment percentage principle. For somebody of my size, starting out with the Glock 42 was starting out with a reasonable, I think my concealment percentage is 42% with the 42.
What? 42?
I know, right? I think it's it's at least in the low 40s. So it's a very reasonable concealment percentage for me, but it's also very shootable. And I think for most people, they wind up on either side. They either wind up with a very shootable gun that's not very concealable, or they wind up with a very concealable gun that's not very shootable. You either think I need to get the smallest thing possible so I can conceal it, or I need to get the biggest thing that I can comfortably shoot. I need to carry the biggest gun I can reasonably conceal, right? So Yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on the Glock 42. It's really easy to shoot. It's very concealable. In fact, right now I'm carrying a P365 with an optic on it and a bore sight grip module. But
Awesome.
there's a specific company that might be working on creating something that may be ultimately someday compatible with the Glock 42. And I could very much see myself carrying that gun again, which would kind of be the full Dunning-Kruger effect for me. It would be, it climbed, did the whole thing, and I'm back to carrying the Glock 42. Although I was talking about revolvers with my husband earlier today and how interesting and beneficial it might be for me to consider carrying a revolver specifically during the summertime, because that grip shape is so much more organic, and organic grip shapes tend to print less because they blend in with the organic shapes of the body. So these are things I'm constantly thinking about.
Very cool.
Well, it's always an evolution, no pun intended to what you said earlier in the name of the show. But so when you said, when I saw your video about 42, the 42, so now I had cataract surgery, early onset cataracts. So, and people will get on to me sometimes. It's hilarious, the freaking gun community. Sometimes it's so lame. So this is my 42 with a Holosun 507K. Now I have to have optics because of my vision. Now I don't need these glasses other than, a foot and a half in front of me, but I can't, it's irresponsible of me to carry a gun without an optic these days. I can see irons great in sunlight. But anything other than sunlight, I have a hard time. So the whole 42 thing, it does get some flack. But Eric, let's take this back to some really legit guys like Daryl Bokey and forgive me, his name's escaping me, the tactical professor,
Claude Warner,
guys that know what they're talking about, suggesting carrying a 22. Okay. Now that I've learned what I've learned, I would be comfortable carrying a 22, but this 380 is definitely a bit punchier than 22. And I noticed that you mentioned that you carry, I think it was Hornady
critical defense.
Critical defense, right? So Eric was watching his video too. So yeah, I carry the Hornady XTP, which is a projectile that usually doesn't expand very well, but when it comes to smaller loads, the penetration is more important. So with that load, now not all FBI protocols, but when it comes to penetration FBI protocols, the XTP bullet does meet it. So I am more than comfortable carrying this pistol. So it's just fun that was one that you liked, because I feel on my own sometimes with the 42. So I get the hint that you feel that way too.
If you can't carry a full size 17 or 19, I am absolutely just joking. The only reason I'm carrying my 19 currently is because it's what I've been wearing today. And I haven't changed it to my sports shorts, which then my 43 goes in my shorts. And so I'm absolutely, I like to be able to carry my 19 or my 17 all the time, but I can't.
Yeah.
And I just find it, again, I'm going to beat up on those people anymore. I'll just shut up. But
one thing I want to add there is just that I hope that people come to be more open to smaller calibers. And I've kind of talked about this a lot, but being that I am a smaller person in this, this industry, but just doing the concealed carry thing, I've found that a lot of the recommendations, content, a lot of that is not geared towards the outlier, right? Of course not. It's kind of geared towards the general. And I am very much like an outlier in terms of size, and that really does make a difference in the world of concealed carry. And there are a lot of women like me. There are a lot of people that are smaller and they're wanting to carry a gun. Of course, like we want to be able to defend ourselves well, and we maybe have a leg down, but we can bring a tool into our life that might help us to close the gap. And as far as concealed carry guns, choosing a concealed carry gun, a lot of the time, like I said, you either have one that's concealable or you have one that's shootable. And when you start considering smaller calibers like 380 or 22, you can begin to achieve both for the smaller person. For example, your guys' concealment percentages are a lot different than mine. And you can manage, a certain size gun, and therefore you can manage, maybe a larger caliber because it's a larger caliber and a larger package, right? The recoil is not as harsh. You also have the muscles and the mass to put behind that recoil. Whereas us little ladies over here, we don't have a lot of muscle and mass to put behind a lot of recoil. And we don't have a whole lot of space to conceal firearms. And so I guess the roundabout thing that I'm trying to say is that I hope that, people will become more accepting of smaller pistol calibers because, we don't have much concealment space. And so having the ability to go down in caliber allows me to be able to maintain a higher accuracy standard. And that is ultimately what matters. It doesn't, I could be carrying a 10 millimeter. And if I can't put it where it belongs, it's not really going to be doing me very much good. And so I'd rather be carrying a smaller caliber and be able to punch it right where it needs to go. So
excellent.
Those are kind of my thoughts on that.
Awesome. I'm glad we got to talk about the 42. I was real excited to see that. But yes, with proper rounds or proper loads from 22 to 10 millimeter, like you said, we're not dealing with capturing criminals, right? We're defending ourselves. Most of the time, it's a psychological stop anyway, right? It needs to be brought down to that. But I mean, the 380 is perfect, in my opinion, for a lot of situations. So now we talked about time early on before. Now we're at an hour and 48 minutes. So let's shut it down here with the most important question of the show, and then we will let you go, Tessa. What are your three favorite bands and or musical artists? This is extremely important.
You see around us here, right?
Right. So it is actually extremely important. And I thought about it a lot beforehand.
Awesome.
And I decided that it would be more prudent of me to break it down into kind of two genres instead of three artists. Okay.
You take it however you want. That is just a starting point.
So for me, I actually grew up with an awesome dad, and he loved music. Like, we had these two massive speakers in our living room, and he would put his chair in the middle of the room and the house would shake. And so I have some amazing memories of like the house shaking to specific music. So for me, in my heart of hearts, I've got like Elton John and Fleetwood Mac just like living in my soul because of that. And then now I would say that like I had to choose some favorite artists. It would be Alison Krauss, which kind of transferred a little bit from those loudspeaker days.
Yes.
And Josh Turner is a really awesome little country artist, and all of his albums have kind of colored my husband and I's dating experience. And finally, I hate to be really typical, but Morgan Wallen is kind of a lot of fun to listen to. So
awesome. Cool. See, this is why we ask this question. Seeing you get animated about it and talk about your life around music. See, the emotion that occurs around music, and then you said it colored your husband and your dating life.
Yeah.
Okay, that's huge, right?
Right.
You know, so now Alison Krauss is freaking incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so since you said that so fast, what are some others? Because the 3 is a starting point. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel like I could probably go on about some of those favorites, but as far as like I also enjoy Christian music, and so that's a
Yes,
whole nother
same here.
genre, right? But I
Okay,
didn't write any
then
of those
let
down.
me
Who's your?
interject.
Yep. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So who's your favorite in Christian then?
Well, that's hard because I didn't think about it ahead of time. But who is my favorite in Christian artist? Who's my favorite Christian artist? Right now, I would say like if I'm gonna just like play something, it's the Psalms album from Shane and Shane. Um, a lot of their like current stuff is just based completely off of scripture, and
Awesome.
I love that. And then kind of like going back in time, Bethany Dillon. Have you heard of Bethany Dillon?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
I've listened to her since I was a little kid. My sister also has just an angelic voice. And so I grew up listening to her playing her guitar and singing in her room. And a lot of the early songs that she would play were Bethany Dillon. So those are
Excellent.
probably my favorites in that genre for sure.
Now, I don't know if you've heard of her, but a gal named Sarah Groves.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, but I don't know that I could
N-
think of any of her songs.
Now, so I love all kinds of music, whether it's Christian or non-Christian. Sarah Groves is Christian. She is one of the best songwriters and arrangers I can think of. So,
Mm,
and an incredible voice. So, yeah, you should check her out.
yeah.
But
Have you heard of Stephen? I think it's Stephen McClellan. Does that sound familiar to
it
you at all?
sounds familiar, but not. I can't place it.
He does like Celtic
Ah,
worship and stuff, and his voice is just ridiculous. Like
awesome,
the music that his band plays and the way that he sings, like it'll take you to another place.
awesome,
Yeah,
excellent.
Very, very important. Yeah, that's awesome.
I like
We
that
had,
question a lot.
yeah, cool.
It really is the most important question of the show.
Yeah.
The main point is it gets people like you that are content creators in this tactical firearm, etc. realm to open up to your personality.
Mm-hmm.
That's the precise reason we talk about it all the time. Music is our life.
Mm.
It's been a huge part of our lives. To not have it as part of even a tactical show for us, Tactical Twins, that is our actual band name. We do the music on a lot of the show, but then we actually have become friends with some kick-ass people that
That's awesome.
provide music for the show too. But we are long in the tooth here. So let everybody know how to find you. And I mean, we really appreciate your time. This has been a blast of a conversation, a unique conversation. You offer so much for so many people and in a package that is accessible, that it is extremely important. So thanks for coming on the show. Let everybody else know in our audience how they can reach you and see where you are.
Well, thank you. I also had a super fun time being on the podcast. You can find me on Instagram right now as armed_and_styled. And you can find me on YouTube as armed and styled. And then if you want very, very specific concealment content, I also, am making content for Filster Holsters over on their YouTube channel.
Kick-ass company. Tell Sarah we want her on the show too.
Will do.
So, well, then we're going to let you go. But Eric, you have any parting thoughts, bro?
Only that I really, really enjoyed this. I knew that we would. I knew from the moment that I met you. I had been exposed to your channel before meeting you, and it was a delight to meet you, and just the conversation we had was just really cool and organic to, of course, TacCon. But I knew that this was going to be a special show, and you delivered big time. I really had a blast.
Well, thank you. I had a great time.